Oh, I'm going to attempt to have Bill Donahue on the screen, because in this particular sermon, if you can call it a sermon, he is talking about photons, how we are photons of light. So I'm trying to put some little photons under him. I'll show you what I have here, my little light board. That's what I call it. Marbles that are mounted upon this board that I zoom in on, and when I do, I get beautiful orbs with color in them and all kinds of little stuff going on in them. And I'm wanting to get the reaction of the orbs to his voice. So here I go. I'm going to begin. Excuse me right now. I'm not focused too good.
All bodies eventually give out either from sickness or just wear out, just like anything else does, whether it be a car, TV, or anything. But the person, what we have realized, the photon that operates that body, doesn't give out. And so now we realize that what we're talking about here is the death of a body, but not a person. Now, that kind of a beautiful picture doesn't take the fear out of dying or the upsetment about it because of the separation. But it does start to get us to a mature point.
Well, I can't get him in it and the orb.
We're not talking about a heaven here. We're not talking about a hell here.
Because when I do, it focuses his face up way too close.
Life,
like I have to come up real close on the focus on these orbs.
We're living now.
So you'll just get to hear him in the background.
It's just like, the leaves fall off the trees and then they come back. And we fall off the earth and then we come back. But there's a difference here, and we have to start thinking in whole different ways. We have to stop this obsession with, dead bodies and cemeteries and funeral parlors, and start to think that, wait a minute, this is a person in an invisible form that left the body that could no longer sustain it. So now we have to direct our attention not to that body, which is broken and taken to the junkyard, but to that person which left the body. The unfortunate thing about all of this is that the overwhelming majority of people cannot possibly deal with this because of the fact that their minds have been broken by the threats and the fears of religion. Even as a little kid, we're told you're going to go to hell and devil's going to get you. And all of these horrible things that we have had built into our minds, literally to scare us into submission, to submit to the cult, to the group, to the religion. And here's the problem. If you cannot abandon religion, you will never learn the truth. Never learn the truth. You'll never make contact with your deceased loved ones, and those who are trying to make contact with you when you previously died, you'll never know them because you'll never understand the complexities of the invisible photon spirit world, if you want to call it that. You'll never, ever know. You must abandon all concepts of religious thought. There's no other way. What you have to do is make a choice. You make a choice. And you set the people on two sides of a stage. And you say, who will I believe about this? And you set the pastors and the priests and the preachers and the rabbis on one side, and then you set the scientists and the physicists, etc., on the other side. And take your choice. Who knows, who can tell you about the subatomic quantum reality of life? The pastors and the priests and the ministers, or the physicists and the scientists? And it's obvious. But most people, just about everybody, doesn't even know who those physicists and scientists are. Because in my opinion, the physicists and the scientists are the real pastors.
I agree with you there.
Because what they do is tell you all about creation, all about the universe, all about you and how you operate and how you interact. And the guys in the robes on the other end of the stage have no clue. But who do we listen to? The guys in the robes on the other side of the stage. So the first thing, and we've shown this before, but it's a perfect, I think, slide to kind of show us what reality and what life really is, okay? Here, as we look at this, these are the points that we had. Can you go back? Is there one? No, you can't go back. No, all right, just stay with it. Go ahead, John. All right, to totally disregard religion is the one thing that we have to do. We have to approach the subject scientifically, and we have to listen to the physicists and the scientists if we're going to make a decision. We have to take the statements of witnesses seriously. If somebody said they had a vision, then we want to sit down and say, what did you see? What did it look like? Who was it? I would love, and I don't think it's allowable, I would love to go into nursing homes and sit down with people who have dementia and talk to them about the people they talk to. What did they look like? What did they say? Did they give you a name? Did they say, because we just, all we do with these people is disregard them and give them shots and drugs and keep them quiet and so forth. So we have to take witnesses seriously. And then the last thing is that we have to do research on opinions on the subject of dying and out-of-body experiences and near-death and that kind of stuff. So let's see if I can get to the right point now. And this is what we've seen many times, but it's an important point. At the very top left-hand corner, you'll see a fetus, and you'll see the photon which enters the fetus on the 49th day. Becomes kind of a living being. Next you see the fetus gives way, becomes a baby, and the photon now is in the baby's body. Can't do much with that, but it's there. Then it becomes a child, and the photon is able to use the body to do a little thing, play games and start to learn things and so forth. Then as we go up to the top, it becomes a teenager, and the photon then has a lot more that it can do as a teenager. Then it becomes an adult, and now the photon has access to all kinds of things. Then it becomes an elderly person all the way over at the right. Things are starting to run downhill a little bit. And at the very bottom is the death look, and the photon says to the lady laying here, "Lady, I'm out of here." And the body dies, and but the point here is, though the physical has gone from the fetus to the old person dying, the photon has stayed the same. The photon never got sick, never aged, never died, stayed the same from one part to the end. It just operated a different piece of equipment. It's no different than when you have that beautiful new car and you got the new car smell, and then at the very end you got the old car smell, and you got to get rid of this thing. It's the same thing. So it's not the body that you wish to communicate with or you have to think about, although that's the natural thing. If I think of my mother or father or my sister or my brothers who have all passed on, I think of them as physical beings. So I perceive, I create something in my mind of what they look like. But see, that is not the way that we're going to start to understand how to communicate with them, because we don't even look the way we look to one another. These are bodies. But I mean, inside with photon. So we want to create a way that we communicate with those loved ones, if you would, photon to photon, not photon to body. Okay? And you know, the important thing is, as we saw in that slide a moment ago, that when the body died, the photon was just as vibrant as it was when it entered the fetus, so death doesn't exist. See? Because a photon cannot die. Even if it is destroyed in a laboratory, it recreates itself. It pops up. So what are we talking about? What is so foolish about this is we, who cannot possibly die as photon, are totally consumed with the destruction of bodies that do that because we've been brought up that way. That's the way we've been brought up. You know? We have been taught that a person dies when the body dies. We've never been taught that that's not true, that it's just the body that dies. So, given what we have studied through science, and given what it says in the Bible, it's impossible for God, whatever that is, to be anything but photon. Because the Bible, which has a basis in Greek science, says God is not human, God is light, and so God has to be photon. And Jesus, the Son of God, has to be photon, and we were created in the image and likeness of God, has to be photon. So this is what this all is. So where else can we start? I mean, we have to start somewhere, and I have to have some kind of justification for where I start, because I'm talking to people, and I know there are people that watch this who are Christians, born-again Christians. They don't tell anybody that they would want, but they do, because you know what? Even though you won't tell your friends that you've ever turned this on, you turn it on because it makes sense. And after all these years of nonsense, this makes sense. So if we use the Bible and we use science, how can anybody challenge that? You know, something that is not human, but is light, is photon. And no argument is possible, because that's the way it is. So here we are, the ones that can't die, talking about what happens after we die. What we have to be considering is, where do we go? I haven't found that yet, but I will find those rascals where they're. I haven't found it yet, but this is what I'm looking for. Where are they? And you know, the amazing thing is what we talked about last week, is that we have died before. And now we're here. And yet there are people who are looking at pictures of us saying, I miss her, I miss him so. And little kids saying, is Uncle Steve up in heaven?
I got orbs on his glasses.
No.
They make
Steve's
shiny
walking
spots. Never done that before. That's cute.
All those people that are crying over his picture and miss him so much, if they only knew he was sitting in the second row looking at me.
But Bill won't be still, so I can't get it for long.
So, I mean, you know, this is, but you see, we remember the people that have died and left us, but we don't remember the people that we have died and left. And there's a reason for that. It's covered in the mythology, as I said last week, of Charon, the boatman who takes you across the river Styx. And when you get to Elysium, they say, do you want to go on to another adventure? Oh, yes. Well, if you do, you have to drink from the water of Lethe, the river of Lethe, L-E-T-H-E. And when you drink it, you forget. You have to forget. Can you imagine if you came each life remembering all the others? You'd go nuts. You go completely nuts. What do you mean I can't have that job? Well, in my last life, I was superintendent of a... Hell out of here. So these are all of the exciting, amazing, and fun things to look forward to and to be involved in and to be challenged to find, operating on a photon level to find those who have left us and bring back the memories of those we have left. Oh, and listen, if you're going to leave religion, which you should do, and start thinking, there are stories that you can read of. There's one of a child, this is making the rounds now, who remembers being in a fighter plane in the Second World War and being shot down by the Japanese, and he remembers the name of the guy who was in the plane next to him, and he remembers what kind of plane it was, and he remembers that when the planes used to land, the Corsairs, they had a lot of trouble with the tires, and this kid never... I mean, it's impossible not to know that. And then there's the kid over in Scotland who remembered where his house was in his previous life, and he knew his mother's name and then they took him, Dr. Jim Tucker of the University of Virginia, took him to this island in Scotland, and they found there was a White House there, and they asked the people that had the tax records, and they said to the kid, well, do you remember your name when you were? And he said, Robertson. And the lady looked, she said, well, there is a White House. It's empty now, but there were people in there by the name of Robertson. How could that be? There's this little Spanish kid that picked up a guitar and he plays this thing like a master. And then this other little kid, he's about 2 feet high. He picked up a trumpet and you think it was Al Hurd. How is that possible? If they didn't live. Of course people lived before. You lived before. But we're forced to believe all this lunacy by religious people that won't accept the very things that are so beautiful and the very things that the Bible supports. Yeah, the female astronaut who remembered that she was in this spaceship that, crashed when it was coming through the atmosphere, and she was from India and all of this stuff. But you see, we don't even think about it. When we hear about it, we laugh about stuff like that because we're raised by the road wizards. Please. If we're going to meet together, and if we're going to explore the subject of death and realize it doesn't exist, and then talk about our previous lives, and talk about... I was reading the other day, and you remember this guy, Weiss, Brian Weiss? He said he had a woman was brought to him who could only speak Chinese. All she could say was, whatever. And they were doing a past life regression on her, and he had a Chinese interpreter there so that he could tell her what he wanted to do, and the Chinese interpreter would tell her in Chinese, taking her back, and when he took her back, finally, she started talking in English. What are you going to tell me? You're going to tell me this Brian Weiss is a liar too? And only Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson tell the truth? Stop! Sorry?
Yeah.
But when we get to understand the photon, then we'll lose this fear of death and we'll start to look forward to the reality of reuniting with the photon lives that have been a part of us. We have been deceived by religion into thinking that we are physical bodies instead of understanding that we use physical bodies. We've gone through so much study here concerning photons and the subatomic. We should be able to grasp the truth concerning death instead of dwelling on it. We know that we came from somewhere when our last body died. Now think about that. You're wondering where someone you loved that died went. Those others were wondering when you died where you went. And where did you went? You went here. Forking River, New Jersey. You didn't go to heaven. You didn't go to hell. You went to Forking River. So you see what I'm saying to you? So where's everybody else? Where's your husband that died? Where's your wife that died? Where's your uncle that died? Were they in Pittsburgh? Or maybe they're in Hong Kong? Or maybe they're in Borneo or Australia? Who knows? But if you're here, why aren't they there or here or wherever? Do you see what I'm saying? It's so simple if we'll start accepting and understanding it and stop believing the robed wizards and start believing those people of science who are sharing the realities of this thing. Yeah, I've had cars going back to the 1950s, but except for the one I have now, they all died, but I'm still here. So we've had bodies going back to infinity, and they all died, but you're still here. And the only reason you don't understand this stuff is because your mind was given over to this lunacy that came out of the Dark Ages of Europe. So what's reality? What is reality concerning us, and who are the witnesses who have instructed us? Okay, let's take a look. Professor Max Tegmark, Massachusetts Institute, David Deutsch, Oxford University, Paul Steinhardt, Princeton, showed us that parallel universes exist and that there are copies of us living in those parallel universes. Now you can turn them down and turn to the priests and the ministers, or you can say, no, I want to talk to these guys. That's what I've chosen to do. The Bible told us that God, Jesus, and we are light, which means we're photons. The Bible writers had access to Greek scientific thoughts, which included the subatomic. So that's a witness. NASA and physicist John Kramer told us that when electrons become excited, they send out photons to the past and the future and also absorb photons. And we learned about photons from them. Okay? We'll go to the next slide. We learned that entangled photons are one both when they are entangled and disentangled. I want to come back here for a minute, Alice. Do you know what this means? Do you know what this means? This means that you have photon, here's one photon, okay? Now, and they're way off on opposite ends of the infinity, and there's one. They're not two, they're still one. That's quantum. Right? That's the new physics that was so challenging to Albert Einstein. We'll come back here. We learned for entangled photons to bring a third photon into the entanglement, one entangled photon must sacrifice its properties and take on the properties of the third one. This explained the sacrifice of Jesus to save us. Now we'll come back here. You see what I mean? Here is God, here is Jesus, and they're entangled. They're one. But they're looking around and they say, oh, there's Paul. What do we do with him? There's Joan and Steve. We got to get these people because we want them up here. We want them part of us. What has to happen is the entanglement has to end. The Jesus photon has to come down, enter into our photon, give itself up, take on our properties, and then go back into the entanglement with the God photon, the sacrifice of the Jesus photon. Like, for God's sakes, it explains the whole damn thing. The whole thing is explained, and it makes sense, and we understand what it was all about. Wow. To me, that is good stuff. Okay. We learn in the next one, Joan, we learn that when entangled photons separate, they are still one. So Jesus saying, I and the Father are one, and when you have seen me, you have seen the Father, and I pray they all may be one, as you and I are one, it makes sense. Because even though they're separated, one's in heaven, one's on the earth, they're still one. And then it says, we learned that excited electrons send photons not only to the future, but the past. So we should be able to communicate not only with those who left us and who have died here, but those that we left when we died someplace else. Okay? All right. So there is a thumbnail sketch of what we have been able to develop so far, which brings forth initial reference to photon from the Bible, and then allows us to present photon from science and from physicists. Now, there was another important part that we did learn, and I do want to add it to our summary before we close the summary out. Let's go back to the slide. We learned that the retinas of your eyes pick up photon signals from physical objects. That's how you see. And then have them deciphered by the brain, which translates them into images. That's how you see things, okay? But then we learned that the pineal gland picks up photon signals from non-physical objects and sends the information to the retinas, which then has the signals deciphered, giving us an illusion of seeing someone who is physically not there. I'm going to come back here. Here's the story. Here's the deal there. You go in, like you said, into a nursing home, and you see somebody, and they're talking to somebody, and there's nobody there. But you see, their change in the brain as they get elderly or whatever and getting ready to transfer over, their change allows them to pick up that photon through the pineal, which is then dispatched to the retina of the eye, giving them the illusion of seeing something. They're actually seeing something that you and I can't see. But there's an explanation for it, a scientific quantum explanation for it. Now here's something else, and we'll go to the next slide, that Jesus said, and let's take a look at it. Jesus said, if your eye be single, your body will fill with light. Well, to confirm that, we learned that melatonin, secreted by the pineal in the dark, distributes photon light throughout the body. That confirms the scripture above and confirms the need for meditation in darkness. And that's why we do have meditation in the darkness. So there's two important items here. The pineal does distribute light throughout the body, as Jesus said. And then it is essential that your meditation be in the dark. Because unless you're in the dark, you're not going to have that melatonin flowing. Okay? So the next obvious and justifiable question would be, okay, these issues are okay for photons. But how can we confirm what the Bible says, that we are photons? When the question of death arises, then our fear is built around our fear of losing ourself, our consciousness, me, you know? I mean, when we're alone, that's all we are involved in is me inside of here. Feeling of self. And you know what Rene Descartes said? Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. In other words, there is an I. And think of this as inside of yourself. There is an I which is you beyond the body, because the body cannot think. Huh? No, your body cannot think. You think. Therefore, you are. I am. It can only act out the program that you program into it, your body. So the thinker isn't the body. The thinker is the photon, which means I am photon because I think. Now, if we can do that, if we can determine that consciousness is photon, then we can realize what we truly are and move on beyond the question of death, looking for those we remember without regard to looking for their bodies. We're looking for their self. We're looking for their I. Can we take away the name we gave them? They don't have that name anymore. Can we take away their physical appearance? They don't have that physical appearance anymore. And even like you, you've got a name. Who gave you that name? They probably flipped the coin. One said I,